While the West is being destroyed from the inside by an autoimmune disease, also known as collective guilt syndrome, it simultaneously faces a number of external, increasingly aggressive totalitarian forces, most prominently that of radical Islam. And on the frontier of this conflict, both militarily and ideologically speaking, we find Israel. In this video series, I'm going to address the most common arguments and points of criticism used against Israel with regards to its current operation in Gaza and its actions towards its enemies as a whole. I will demonstrate how most of this criticism is either deceptive or logically incoherent, and one argument at a time, I will give you the most precise and concise way to dismantle those arguments completely. Without further ado, I give you the case for Israel. The displacement myth entails two stories used commonly as an argument against Israeli actions, not just in Gaza right now, but also historically during earlier conflicts as well as right now in Lebanon. One side of the story is the historical displacement of Palestinians during conflicts, of course most notably during the First Arab-Israeli War in 1948, and the second one consists of contemporary examples of Palestinians being evicted from their homes on the basis of being Palestinian, something which of course ultimately taps into this whole apartheid narrative surrounding Israel. In this video, I'm going to focus on the first part of this myth, and potentially one of the most commonly believed lies about Israel, the part related to the Nakba. In the video next week, I'm going to focus on the second part of this myth. So if you are interested in diving into the truth about the current conflict in the Middle East, starting here with Israel, of course, or if you're just one of those crazy weirdos who like to get a different perspective on a sensitive topic, then please remember to subscribe to my channel. Let's go. Now, turning to the most significant example of displacement of Palestinians to ever have happened as a single historical event, the Nakba. First, it means the catastrophe in Arabic. And there is actually some discussion over whether this word originally specifically referred to the large amount of displaced Palestinian civilians, or the fact that the establishment of Israel itself was widely regarded as a catastrophe among Muslims. Something which of course in itself means very little to the validity of this argument, but just something to keep in mind. Okay, so in 1947, the British decide that they don't want to control this region anymore. They give up the British mandate in Palestine and they hand it over to the UN, basically telling them, guys, we're leaving. Please find a solution. And the UN, of course, thereafter presents its famous partition plan that same year, suggesting to divide the area in the following way. Now, the Jewish leadership accepted this, the Arab leadership rejected it, as they have with most diplomatic attempts of a solution to this conflict ever since. Now, despite being warned by several Arab states that the establishment of a Jewish state would lead to war, Israel was established on May 14th, 1948. And the next day, May 15th that is, Israel was invaded by 5 Arab countries and the First Arab-Israeli War began. So where did the Nakba fit into this? First of all, as fighting intensified, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians either fled or were expelled from their homes. It is estimated that around 700,000 Palestinians left their homes during the war. Now, there is a myth surrounding the Nakba. And this is the reason why this historical event is often used against Israel. Namely that the displacement of Palestinians happened primarily due to the Israelis forcefully kicking people out of their homes. This, however, is not true. In reality, the total number of displaced Palestinians can be divided overall into 3 groups based on why they fled. Now, the first group were the ones that fled because of fears of being caught in the middle of an intensifying war. Simple as that. Bullets were flying around, so naturally people packed their bags and left. This, by most accounts, make up the majority of the people who were displaced during this conflict. And now the thing is, Israel can hardly be blamed for this, since they of course didn't start the war. Now the second group consisted of people leaving their homes, not because the Israelis told them to, but because the invading Arabs told them to. Now there were many instances during this war where invading Arab armies asked the Arab civilians living in Palestine to leave their villages, get out of the way, to make way for the invading forces. They were basically told, please leave your homes, it's just temporary, make way for us, we'll go in, destroy the Zionist entity, and then you can come back. Unfortunately for these people, that didn't happen, of course, because the Israelis won. Now there are several great and prominent historians over time who have described this factor in detail. And if you want to check out more about it, if you should choose just one source to read about this exact aspect of the conflict, I suggest you read Fabricating Israeli History, the New Historians from 1997 by a Ephraim Kash. And then there is, of course, the third group, people who were forcefully removed by the Israelis. Now, this is, of course, the group that is often portrayed as making up the majority of the displaced Palestinians. By many accounts, however, as already mentioned, this is not the case. But we have to keep in mind that in reality, this did happen, of course. There are a couple of things to remember here, though. Firstly, that it happened mostly due to tactical considerations, and the fact that the Israelis were afraid of ambushes, guerrilla warfare, etc. So they told some civilians to pack their bags and leave their villages. And lastly, it's important to mention that according to a number of historians who have studied this event in detail, Ephraim Kash that I mentioned before is one of them, by the way. This group actually constitutes the smallest of the three, not the largest. And even when considering the last group here, as long as it was done due to tactical considerations, you can't blame the Israelis, because a force defending itself against an outside aggressor needs to do what it needs to do, and that is to win and survive. Expelling Palestinians from their villages due to them either being or housing potential enemies is more or less equivalent with the British interning Germans or Austrians in India, or the US interning Japanese civilians on US soil during the Second World War. It is an issue that can be discussed, especially when considering the extent to which it actually brought any of these powers closer to victory. But still, to claim that the Nakba, or the general displacement of Palestinians during the Arab-Israeli War, happened due to some kind of intention of ethnic cleansing, which is, as I said, a very common claim, is something which starts to look completely preposterous the moment you begin to actually study this event in detail, rather than just watch YouTube shorts about it.